Welcome to the Daily Freedomist Show from Freedomist.com. This is your host, Paul Gordon Collier. You go to Freedomist.com and you get news and intelligence for free people. Accurate, timely, being free to prosper and live as you choose isn't something that just happens. You make it happen. But to make it happen, you need to be armed with insights, knowledge, resources, and credible analysis of the events shaping your world and your life. Here's some of the stories that we won't be talking about because they're not included in this story. But you go to Freedomist.com and you can learn about these stories. Black Lives Matter divisions, dramas exposed in Chauvin trial. That's our top story report. Chairman Xi takes aim at U.S. global leadership positions as coalitions form to oppose it. That's the editor's choice report. Meet the drone swarm killer, microwaves. For our Freedom Headlines report. Are only 6% of Americans, quote, the one and only way, quote, unquote, version of Christians? That's our Christian Headlines report. And then we have the stories that we're going to actually get to. And if you want to look at the stories, you can go to, you click on the right-hand corner of Freedomist.com on the NewsWatch page, or you can go to Freedomist.com/NW, and you get the Freedomist NewsWatch. We'll have our latest Freedomist short video will be up here, and our latest Freedomist Daily Show will be up here. And as you can see, these are from yesterday, so they will be replaced after I'm done recording and live streaming this. This is a Freedomist News Watch that you can go to, and you can get all the links for yourself and see all the stories. So many things that we don't even get to talk about because I tell you the truth, I could easily cover 10 to 12 stories that I might consider somewhat essential for people to know about if they want to make informed decisions about what's going on in the world. And with that in mind, let's get ready to do our first story. Oop. I almost started recording before I did this. There you go. That's better. Now we're set. Brooklyn Center cop charged with involuntary manslaughter, city manager fired. This is a topic report, and the topic we're looking at is Brooklyn Center cop shooting fallout. As things continue to unfold, as long as it's relevant, or as long as we deem it's relevant, we'll keep covering it. Our top link that we're going to focus on here is Kim Potter will be charged with manslaughter and Daunte Wright killing. From New York Times, written by Nicholas Boge-Burroughs and Julie Bossman. The white Minnesota police officer who fatally shot Daunte Wright, a 20-year-old black man, white, black. You see what they're doing there. I mean, she was white and he was black, but you see what they're doing there. After appearing to mistake her handgun for her taser, will be charged with second-degree manslaughter, a prosecutor said on Wednesday, following 3 nights of protests over the killing. And I sure hope that they didn't do it because of the protests, but, maybe not so much in light of this next story, which is related. Brooklyn Center Council member voted to fire city manager because she feared BLM retaliation. So this is from, let's see where this is from. This is probably, I was going to say it. There it is, legal insurrection. So he was doing a great job. I respect him dearly. I didn't want repercussions at a personal level. Brooklyn Center Council member Chris Lawson Anderson said of her vote. You look at that, you're doing a great job. Doesn't matter if you're doing a great job. You have to toe the corpo state or the corporate nationalist party line. If you're going to be a politician, if you're going to be employed, if you're going to be able to purchase products, you have to toe the corporate nationalist party line, which happens to be the critical race theory garbage. And that is, they don't really care about critical race theory. What they do care about is the power that it affords them to be able to control we the poors. And these people are just enabling billionaires with all of this action. So, as Mary reported earlier, Brooklyn Center, Minnesota saw a third night of the type of Antifa BLM-led rioting and looting that occurred with regularity last year in the aftermath of George Floyd's death. But as local law enforcement tried in vain to quell the chaos that erupted on city streets, in response to the officer-involved shooting death of 20-year-old Daunte Wright, a different kind of chaos involving city leaders was taking place behind the scenes. Brooklyn Center city manager Kurt Bogany, who is black. There you go. That's just, by the way, If you think that you're a member of the Safe Nation, you know, the POC Nation, the person of color, or now the BIPOC Nation, as the black extremist attempt to take hegemony over all the other races, which isn't going to work, especially among the Hispanic races, because the Hispanics are way more numerous and way more powerful than the black community. So it's going to be a problem when, well, I think Hispanics are already starting to figure that out. But you have to fire a black manager because it's more important that you toe the party line. That's what it's really about. It's about that's ideological hegemony that you maintain. And in the name of diversity, you assure that there is none. Was voted out of a job Monday after the city council voted to fire him. Was out of a job on Monday. Bogany, 16-year employment with the city, was terminated just a few hours after he publicly expressed disagreement with Mayor Mike Elliott during a press conference where he both addressed the shooting. Let me be very clear. My position is that we cannot afford to make mistakes that lead to the loss of all life of other people in our profession. I do fully support releasing the officer of her duties. Before leaving the podium, Elliott noted that Bogany, as city manager, had the authority to determine whether the officer would be fired. Bogany noted that he would not take immediate action to remove the officer. All employees working for the City of Brooklyn Center are entitled to due process with respect to discipline. Oh my, how dare you be for due? See, this is why the corporate media or the corporate nationalists are using the vehicle of power that is critical race theory, because it is the most effective moral supremacist vehicle that will get frightened poor people to agree to kill King Bill, the real law of the land, the real ruler of the land, King Bill, the Bill of Rights. And so he cries due process. We can't have that. We can't have that. So they fire him. This whole city council, they're, from an American Bill of Rights perspective, they're pretty much traitors. They're treasonous. They're acting in direct opposition to the Bill of Rights. They're literally firing him for sustaining and maintaining the rule of law under King Bill. So there's that. Then we get to another story here. Brooklyn City Center city manager fired for calling for due process speaks out. Okay, I won't read that excerpt for that one. Protesters chased CNN crew covered during the Dante Wright arrest. The green shirts are turning on their masters. And and the masters are going to have to try to control. This is why Biden is suddenly saying, "Hey, man, let's do an investigation. Let's figure out the facts." Because they're at some point the DNC, which is basically the corporate nationalists themselves. That's their vehicle of power within the political arena. The DNC is essentially preparing at some point in the very near future to separate from the green shirts and they'll create laws, standards, whatever. The same laws and standards that the green shirts are now enabling through terror are the same laws and standards that the DNC corporate nationalists will use to eventually show up at their doors and take them out, as was witnessed by the black city manager who didn't say the right things. And I think, there's more stories here, but those are the real essential ones. I encourage you to go to Freedomist.com and check this story out for yourself. Check all the stories out here for yourself, and you decide for yourself what's what. All right, let's get to our next story. Is mistaking a taser for a gun a plausible defense in the Brooklyn Center shooting? This is a topic report. Now, this picture here is a picture, well, I'll get to it here. It's from a tweet here from Curtis Gilbert. I don't know who he is, but he had an interesting thread here. I don't know if this is the actual gun used because I couldn't find the actual gun used, but I'd imagine that I believe their gun is probably, at the very least, maybe it's black. So I don't know if this is exactly a fair comparison, but the difference between the two, not really all that, really pronounced in terms of weight, in terms of a number of reasons. Well, we'll get to that. So Curtis Gilbert here says, the Minnesota police officer charged today with killing Dante Wright isn't the first cop to mistake a gun for a taser. It happens every year or two. Departments have tweaked policies to reduce the confusion, but one thing hasn't changed. Tasers are still shaped like guns. Now, I don't know if I can get to this thread for him. So let's see if we can get to the thread. Okay. This is what I want to get to. I want to get to this thread because he has some interesting points here. The reason for the design is simple. According to the man responsible for the widespread use of tasers in law enforcement, it's what police want. Tasers haven't always been gun-shaped. The original prototype, developed in the 1970s by scientist Jack Cover, looked more like a bulky flashlight. That's the model LAPD officers used on Rodney King. Today, tasers are made by Axon. Its first weapon, released in 1995, also looked more like a flashlight than a gun. It sold poorly. Well, you know. Back in 1999, Axon, then called Taser International, had a breakthrough. It jacked up the power of the weapons produced and redesigned them to look like guns. Police departments bought them like crazy, and you can see what that looks like there. It's that's closer to a gun, but still pretty significantly enough different to me. In 2015, Axon founder Rick Smith explained that making the taser look like a gun was critical to getting cops to take it seriously. Never mind the danger of making it look like a gun. No thought about that. Smith said his staff made foam prototypes of various designs and brought them to the policing conference. His favorite one was made to look super futuristic like the phaser from Star Trek. The cops all laughed at it. Officers were immediately drawn to the gun-like design. You just think about the psychology of these cops that refuse to buy a taser because it doesn't look like a gun. They have to feel, the gun is this symbol of power and authority, and the taser doesn't look like power and authority. You look more like a medical staff professional when you wield one of these. Here's what it is. Here's the medical staff professional. Here is a cop. What kind of mentality do our police have that they won't buy this? They have to buy this. What kind of mentality are we working on? This is, whatever you want to say. I'm not a BLM fan. If you listen to this show long enough, you realize that. But the police reform idea, the notion of changing the very way that we do policing, I'm 100% in support of that. And that can be reflected in the fact that a 26-year veteran who was training another human being, and she, as we covered in the last story, you see this image here, joined the police department in 1995, served in 2019 as the police union's president. Whatever's going on in that police department, and by the way, look at her taser there. Well, you look at the taser there. That's a yellow taser. How do you have such lack of? I understand how I might have lack of control in that situation, and I might possibly make a mistake and use my taser instead of my gun. Possibly, maybe. I don't really think so, but possibly in that heated moment where maybe you're fearful. I'm fearful for my life. This is a 26-year veteran. This talks about the systemic problems that must exist in the Minnesota Police Department, that this is your banner. This is your standard bearer. A woman, it doesn't matter whether she's a man or woman. I'm just saying woman because she's a woman. I don't want to vilify her because she's a woman. I don't want to go down that road. A human being. How about I just say that? A human being who has top-level standing in that police department and yet doesn't have enough training, doesn't have enough composure, doesn't have enough professionalism, doesn't have enough respect for the lethal power that she has over other human beings to be disciplined enough to pull her taser instead of her gun, and to make sure before she fires, she's firing a taser. She even says taser, taser, taser. I'm assuming if you say taser, 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 I bet that's part of the training. That is another period of time where you have an opportunity to make sure that what you're pointing at that person is a taser and not a gun. But because police officers, they want to feel the authority that they do possess. And the taser that looks like this, that's a medical professional. That's not good enough for them. This is a taser that looks like authority. And a lot of these folks, you create a position that creates authority over the lives of others, over, I won't say unaccountable authority, but nowhere near the accountability that we as citizens have. And what do you think that you're going to do? I'm not saying that all cops are authoritarian jerkwaters, but I am saying you're going to have a high percentage of bullies, of authoritarian bullies that will be attracted to that position. So that's the position that we have. That's the state of the affairs. And we have more stories here. If you want to go to Freedomist.com, check out this link. And here's the protocol for Columbus. You have more links here from folks that are talking about Columbus Protocol for law enforcement for tasers and guns, how the courts have handled, that's from dispatch.com, New York Times, how the courts have handled accidental discharge cases, Roland Park police changed taser policy following Brooklyn Center, Minnesota shooting. So all these police departments are like, oh no, we got a PR problem. We better do something about that because now everybody's afraid. You get all these tasers, and I don't really want to think that a cop is going to make a mistake between a taser and a gun. I would say the big change should be no more tasers that look like guns. I don't care what cops want. I don't care. You know what? Yeah, I'll say that the free market should not have a say when it comes to how our officers are armed. I'll just leave it at that. I'm 100% for the free market, by the way, but not in this case. All right, let's get to our next story. We're going a little international here. Although, well, yeah, it's international. I'll just leave it at that. Biden admin backs down from Russia as U.S. warships turn back from Black Sea, Ukraine. This is a topic report, and the topic is Ukraine tensions rise as Russia moves and U.S. moves in, as Russia moves in and U.S. moves out. So these stories will show that. U.S. warships heading to Ukraine turn back after Russia warns them to stop for their own good. The Sun.co.uk. Imagine what that does to the U.S. military's morale, that President Biden, the collective known as President Biden, if you will, that President Biden, it says here, Biden blinks first. How demoralizing is it for these troops that they're on their way? And then now, not that I was in favor necessarily of the U.S. being there in the first place. I'm personally not, but I see how this looks. Once you make the decision, wow, to just back off. And then from the Sun here, we have U.S. warships steaming toward the Black Sea have reportedly turned back after Russia warned Joe Biden's military to steer clear of the region. Turkish diplomatic sources said the passage of the first American ships through the Bosphorus, due to happen on Wednesday, did not take place. So they didn't even release this publicly. The Turks are telling on Biden. Boy, the Turks, I tell you, the Turks under Erdogan, they don't care. They don't care. They tick off everyone. The Andalus State News Agency said both deployments have now been scrapped, with Turkey reporting it has not yet been informed of any rescheduling. The Kremlin had earlier warned U.S. warships to stay well away from Crimea for their own good, calling their deployment in the Black Sea a provocation designed to test Russian nerves. There's not going to be a war between Russia and the U.S. Let me repeat, nuclear weapons, okay? So everybody stop it. When everybody said, oh, North Korea, back when Trump was still president, they had the whole North Korea scare. Oh, it's going to be a war. Oh, then there was the Iran scare. Oh, it's going to be a war. No, there's not. Nuclear weapons, folks. Nuclear weapons. The United States is our adversary and does everything it can to undermine Russia's position on the world stage. Right. That's the nature of nation statism. That's what nation states do. Stop trying to pretend that you're not doing the same thing, Russia, and United States conversely, let's not pretend that we're not doing the same thing. We're working in our best interest. In the case of the powers that control the United States of America, the corporate nationalists, they're not really looking after the interest of the United States of America, because the United States of America is King Bill of Rights, and that is something that they seek to change. That's why they're doing the whole critical race theory and all that stuff. But they got to play a game with it to some degree. And they're certainly not in favor of Russia leading the way as far as the new corporate nationalist reality, because Russia is still a traditional nation-state power, as is China, traditional nation-state power. The United States of America's power center is in corporate nationalism, which seeks to destroy all nation-statisms and have, optimally, I don't think they'll ever get close to this, but optimally what they would love is a one-world corporate nationalist empire. But that'll never happen, because corporate nationalists are filled with psychopath killers, just like politicians are. So the minute that they consolidate power, somebody will say, there can be only one. And then there'll be a fight for the one, and there's no one power that has all the power to control them all. At least that's what I surmise. And we'll go and look at more stories connected to this. We have U.S. cancels Black Sea deployment of 2 warships. The United States has canceled this week's planned deployment of 2 warships in the Black Seas, Turkish officials and media said on Wednesday. Not the United States official release, so we'll see how this plays out. Secretary of Russian Security Council fears Ukrainian invasion. So, Kremlin has sharply changed its rhetoric and is already talking about the probable invasion of Ukraine and occupied Crimea. This is from Defense Blog. Russia sends 15 warships to Ukraine after warning U.S. destroyers to turn back. 15 warships. This is from the sun.co.uk. So 15 warships are heading to Ukraine while, and I always want to say the Ukraine because I grew up with that, but now they're like, no, it's Ukraine. Whatever. CIA says, and that was from, I did say that's from the Sun. CIA says Russia's military buildup now enough to launch incursions into Ukraine. And this is from thenationalnews.com. So thenationalnews.com. William Burns says President Biden called Vladimir Putin to register very clearly the seriousness of our concern. Even if the United States is not officially pulling back the ships, the fact that they delayed it is more than enough for Russia to know, yeah, we don't have to take you seriously. You're not an impediment. You're not any significant impediment to what we're doing. I thought this one was really bizarre. Giant armed robots loom over street of rebel-controlled Donetsk as tensions rise in Ukraine. Rebel-controlled, that's what we're going to call it. This is basically Russian-controlled. And like I said, what you'll end up with is the Russian nationalists versus the Ukrainian nationalists, but it's really Russia and its proxy, and the United States, Turkey, and whatever, and their proxy. And meanwhile, Russia and the United States and whatnot, they get to test their toys on the lives of other human beings, not their citizens. And this is a case in point. This is just bizarre. Giant armed robots loom over streets of rebel-controlled Donetsk as tensions rise in Ukraine. This is a real story. Tanks of the Ukrainian armed forces are seen during drills near the border of Crimea, but they will do little to quell the unrest developing and as Russia's military forces continue to build up close to the Ukrainian border. And then the last story we'll focus on here, Russia ramps up war games, ignores U.S. warnings over Ukraine. And of course they will, especially because the United States had ships sending along the way. Whether they eventually get there or not, it's probably less likely now since Russia has rushed 15 warships into the region, so it's less likely, significantly less likely that the U.S. warships will show up. And there's that story. Wonderful. Let's go to our next story. Another international story. Myanmar junta resistance appeals to American corporate nationalists to save them. This is the topic report. The topic is resistance to Myanmar junta expands. But this first story that I picked for this, Myanmar activist, or should I say Burmese activist? I'm going to stick with Myanmar for now. Myanmar activists beg American, by the way, free Burma, Myanmar are the same thing. Myanmar activists beg American brands to help them end the military coup. This is from, ironically enough, this is from Mother Jones. This is a beautiful thing. It's a beautiful thing. Mother Jones is, they're left-leaning. And now, I don't like Mother Jones, but as left sites go, they're less bombastic. They're less Marat-like. Marat, the French journalist from the quote-unquote, French newspaper man from the French Revolution who lobbed Molotov cocktails at everybody through his paper, lies and fake news. They're less that than some others, but still. So, dear Beyonce, Myanmar activists beg American brands to help them end the military coup. Let our journalists one evening, in March, Nan, a 20-year-old medical student in eastern Miami, sat in bed with her phone and composed a Twitter message to Beyonce. Dearest Beyonce, Myanmar people love you and your music, but this wasn't your usual fan mail. Nan wanted the musician and global icon to know that Myanmar soldiers had seized control of the country in a coup and were now gunning down protesters in the streets. Victims include women who worked at the garment factories, like the one that supplies Adidas, which recently partnered with Beyonce to sell a clothing and sneaker line. So here we go, corporate nationalist. Your moral supremacism that you're using to form a de facto political party to oppose the GOP, because that's essentially what you've done. And the opposition to the GOP's voter rights or voter reform, whatever you call it, laws that the states are passing. You formed a political party, an unaccountable political party in which only billionaires get in. What do? You're now the moral supremacist. You're the popes. You're the popes and the priests of the land. So popes and priests, are you going to step up and are you going to honor the Myanmar people and use your considerable corporate power to oppose the junta, to let the junta know that nobody will do business with the junta if they do this? Well, we'll see. My suspicion is it's going to be crickets, because ultimately the corporate nationalists are interested in methods of controlling we the poors, and the Myanmar junta is working on just that, controlling people against their will. In this case, these people are outright ready to die on the streets. They're so opposed to this junta. Myanmar's lost generation, young people sacrifice futures for freedom. If they win, I won't marry or have children because I wouldn't want my family to live under their control. There's a lot of stuff that's we're not at the Myanmar stage in America, but there's a lot of people that are opposed to this corporate nationalist power grab that's going on the United States of America right now, and some people have already got to this point where they said, I don't know if I want to have children and grow up in this land. And as more and more people get to the point where they have no reason to live in this land, you're going to see more violence, even way more than you've already seen. And I don't advocate for violence. Well, anyway. Myanmar security forces fire on protesting medical workers. Some hurt. Yeah, they're firing. This from Today Online. This last one from, it says Reddit, but it's not from Reddit here. Just a Reddit link. The Guardian UK is where that last one was from. Myanmar security forces I said that. Medical workers, that's from Today Online. 18 MPs among 3,800 Myanmar nationalists take shelter in Mizoram, China, as China gives a dozen drones to Myanmar army in Myanmar as protesters suppress them. So I'm waiting for the drone wars. I've been watching for that. It hasn't quite happened yet, but it could anytime soon now. Australian government and if you do see drone wars, then you know this is going to be a prolonged affair, because all the corporate nationalists and all the state nationalists are going to want to test the toys again on the lives of other human beings that are not directly under their control, so they don't have to deal with the political blowback. Australian government tells Myanmar nationals they won't be forced to return. Well, that's wonderful to hear. That's from The Guardian. And then we have from Washington Post. As Myanmar unravels after military coup, people flee cities for rural backwaters. So this happened in America even as we speak. There are people that are moving. Well, the people that are moving out of the cities are moving into the suburbs. People live in the cities. Suburbs are moving to the rural areas. I myself am looking for an opportunity. Well, I'm not anymore because of my. I feel like I have a calling to serve Bethlehem, PA, which is where I live. So I don't think I'm going to leave the city, even though more and more cities are dangerous, because it's much easier to control human beings in cities than it is in rural regions, and that's why they're heading to the hills, literally. So it's interesting to watch that pattern start to unfold. Myanmar junta taps Russian air power to bomb ethnic rebels. This is from Nikkei.com. The skies above Myanmar's hinterlands have thundered from Russian-made jets over the past 3 weeks as they bombed strongholds of ethnic rebels along the country's borders with China and Thailand. So I don't know if Russia is giving condolence to this, but I imagine that Russia will. I know both Russia and China are both pushing back against the quote-unquote international community to try to prevent them from doing anything to the junta. So I think they want the junta to maintain control. I think both China and Russia would prefer a less free Myanmar, because in general they're less free models of governance. And the old story is, if you have a model of governance in which the prevailing powers that's not based on what the prevailing powers models of governance are, that puts a target on your back. It's like the Dutch Republic back in the, 1600s, whenever it was. I don't remember, 1600s, 1500s, where the Dutch Republic declares itself, and then all of the king, queen empires turn on them and try to annihilate them just because they have a form of governance which undermines their authority. It delegitimizes them just by being. And then finally we have Myanmar ethnic groups unite and fight against army, sights set on federal rights. You see that at some point. This is why in America they're working so hard, the corporate nationalists, to divide us according to race. Because the real division is between the poors, the vassals of the Citadelians, and the Citadelians themselves. Those are the people in fundamental positions of power in the corporate nationalist structure, such as that is. And they would rather us focus on our ethnicity and race and turn each other against one another and give each other fear and hate, so that the people that they feel like they're getting relief from will sign up to standards and practices that will fundamentally undermine all our freedoms, include their own. And in Myanmar, well, the ethnic people are coming together. Their divisions are not nearly as important as their realization that all of their freedoms are threatened by the junta. And hopefully that's what we'll see happen in America, although without the violence, in hopefully a more peaceful way than what's going on in Myanmar, God willing. Next story here, we're going to go and stay in the international sphere. Truth Ministry changes Trump Afghanistan peace treaty to Biden plan. This is a topic report, and the topic is Trump Afghanistan peace treaty becomes Biden peace plan. The Ministry of Truth is basically going to change history for you, right before your very eyes. It's kind of like what they're doing, in some sense, is kind of like Donald Trump is kind of like Hatshepsut of Egypt. Now, Hatshepsut was a woman who fit outside of the mold of the Orthodox view of who could be potentially a pharaoh. In her case, just her being a woman. And this is basically anti-competitivism is what it really underlies all of this. And the idea here is to create standards that eliminate as much competition as you possibly can. So Hatshepsut, not only was she a pharaoh, but she's maybe one of the greatest pharaohs of Egypt. She would have been, if she would have was a man, she would have been called Hatshepsut the Great. I'm sure of that, because she did phenomenal things, such as you can under the state type of the coercive enterprise governance model. But they needed to not have that precedent exist, that someone outside of their political orthodoxy could actually gain power and rule to some degree effectively. I'm not saying whether Trump ruled effectively or not, but certainly significant portions of people believe he did. And he is like, in a way, Hatshepsut, except instead of he's not a woman, but his problem is not that he was a woman, because he's not a woman. His problem is that he came from well outside the established path to become a political leader, to become a president. Not just that he was a billionaire and he didn't go through the political system, but that he was a billionaire that espoused views that were fundamentally opposed to the political orthodoxy of both political parties. That, well, I mean, it's essentially it's been corporate nationalist for a while, and he's been fundamentally he's trying to revise the notion of nation statism rather than corporate nationalism. And that's really, they have to get rid of him. So they have to get rid of all efforts. So what they did with Hatshepsut is they chiseled out her face. And so what they're doing with the news is they're chiseling out his face. And these are some of the headlines here. America does not need to fight forever wars. Schumer praises Biden's choice to pull troops out from Afghanistan by September 11th. Now, this is a title by the Daily Caller. From Politics USA, this is a left-leaning site, and this is one of the worst. Not the worst, but one of the worst. Barack Obama praises Joe Biden's decision to get out of Afghanistan. There you go. There, the Ministry of Truth is going to convince you and hope that you forget that this was Trump that did this. And when he did it, the entire left, the entire establishment left was against it, thought he was crazy, and the entire establishment right was also against it. And Lindsey Graham, to his credit at least, he's still opposed to it. Even, well, I guess not really to his credit. I'll say to his credit, he did oppose it under Trump, and now he opposes it under Biden as well, because Lindsey Graham never met a war he didn't want to fight, although not him personally, your children, not him. Biden tells U.S. time to end America's longest war in Afghanistan, from news24.com. Let's just forget that Trump was the one. Biden tells U.S. time to end America's longest war in Afghanistan. I already read that, News 24. From news.yahoo.com, Blinken in Afghanistan to sell Biden troop withdrawal. And then we have White House previews Biden plan to fully withdraw troops from Afghanistan by September. And this is from Talking Points memo. Kind of tepid as far as the left sites are concerned. CBS praises Biden's Afghan withdrawal, discounted Trump's peace deal for it. Yeah, well, there you go. Newsbusters is pointing it out that this is what they're doing. They're head-shep-sitting Donald J. Trump. At least that's what they're trying to do, because he fits outside of the orthodox mold. Nation-statism has been dead in America since George Bush the First took power and made a deal with the CIA devil, and then they made a deal with the Chinese devil, and that's what empowered the corporate nationalists. That's what caused the rise of corporate nationalism in America. And Donald J. Trump came along and says, no, let's reboot. So let's erase that. Let's erase that evidence altogether. The only thing that they'll remember is the hideous things that Donald Trump did, and he did plenty of those too. So they'll highlight those, and they'll highlight all the quote-unquote good things that he did. MSNBC, by the way, they'll do many of the same hideous things that he did. They just will hide it when they do it. MSNBC demands expert explain himself for hitting Biden on Afghanistan withdrawal. This is from Newsbusters again. And then from Politics USA again, Biden says it wasn't a hard decision to remove U.S. troops from Afghanistan. Well, especially because Donald Trump already made the peace deal, but the Ministry of Truth wants to pretend that didn't happen because reasons. Yep, that's the DNC. That's the party of equality and justice for all right there. You should never trust anyone that is willing to change history for you, especially when they're willing to change history so soon to when it happens. It's one thing to change history from 20 years ago, but this is history from just a year or two ago. That is bold. That is a political machine that imagines that it has godlike power in the land, and it imagines that it has it because in large part it does. All right, there's a lovely story for you. U.S. ambassador to UN undermines U.S. by declaring U.S. built on white supremacism. And this is a topic report, and the topic is U.S. ambassador to UN calls U.S. racist, emboldens China. Now, you see this woman's face, and obviously she's black. And I just want to point out to my readers, I just want to caution here, because some of you may have a tendency to try to stigmatize the black face because it's associated with her and saying U.S. declaring that the U.S. is built on white supremacism, and the media, the corporate nationalists want you to hate black people. What I want to point out is that the people saying that the U.S. is built on white supremacism, undermining American authority internally and abroad, destroying American sovereignty, they're mostly white people. So let's keep that in mind. This is mostly led by, it initiated with white academics who gave the corporate nationalists the moral cover to do what they're doing. And I tell you, the people that say that the U.S. is built on white supremacism, that's a dog whistle for, I hate the Bill of Rights, we must destroy the Bill of Rights so that corporate nationalists don't have that petty impediment that to their expansion of power and their control over human life. That's what's going on here. This woman might as well be a white billionaire, because that's who she serves. She is a white billionaire in essence. So when you look at her face, I want you to see the face predominantly of white billionaires. Don't attach what she says to black America. U.S. ambassadors to UN, well, I already read that. Biden UN ambassador says white supremacy weaved into America's founding documents. From FoxNews.com, U.S. Ambassador to the United Nations, Linda Thomas Greenfield, pledged Wednesday to prioritize efforts to combat racism. She's a UN ambassador, but she's going to somehow prioritize efforts to attack the American state, to attack the American nation, to attack the American people, to use fears of racism and bigotry and whatever to get people to agree to new laws and standards that strip us of our bills of rights, that kills King Bill once and for all, so that the Wilsonian dream of the hive mind versus the individual protected by liberty is prevailing, and you have, in essence, a corporate nationalist empire. This is I don't know. This is, well, there's some truth to this. Obviously, we started off with 3/5 of a person. The United States of America started off declaring 3/5 of a person. That's white supremacism. So she's not entirely wrong. But the United States of America was not built on white supremacism. It was in part. It was in part built on slavery. And black America out there with this idea that somehow black slaves built America, that's just absolutely ludicrous. Human beings built America from a variety of backgrounds. You don't want to forget and I know this is a pejorative, but they call them the so-called coolies. And in the West, the Chinese de facto slaves. You don't want to forget a lot of people that built America under very oppressive conditions, but also the people that built America that weren't under oppressive conditions. You won't want to forget the fact that the United States of America, it started off as a racist slave nation that built into its DNA the very thing that would destroy its own racism, and that's the Bill of Rights. Because you cannot, unless you can continue to convince people that human beings are not human beings, which they couldn't sustain it. They tried, they couldn't sustain it. The Bill of Rights will do what it do. And what it does is it challenges human beings to live to these Bill of Rights standards. And that means that you have to free the slaves. So built into the very American system was the thing that undid its racist origins. You can't discount that. If you do discount that, what you're really doing is discounting the Bill of Rights itself, and that's the dog whistle. That's the dog whistle that's going on here. They're simply dog whistling their opposition to the Bill of Rights, that they need to destroy the Bill of Rights so that corporate nationalism can reign supreme, because corporate nationalism and individual rights do not coexist. Race is also a geopolitical issue from FT.com. White privilege. That's a horrible, horrible, horrible pejorative phrase. And when you say that to children, when you say that to you know what, let me just do this here. Let me say, I'm just gonna type white baby. Let's just type white baby. I just want to get this. I want people to get this. You see this human being here? I want you to look into this beautiful little girl's face. I think it's a little girl. Maybe a little boy. I don't know. I want you to, it doesn't matter. Look into this beautiful child's face and tell them white privilege and whiteness is a pejorative thing that must be stamped out. You tell that to this white baby, and you tell me that you're not, well, that you don't have an unnatural love for children. I'll just say that. And that's pretty much where this is going to lead to. This is going to lead to horrible, horrible. It's already doing it in our schools. The people that use this type of language talk about dog whistles. This is a dog whistle for unnatural liking of children, in essence, is what you see. When people say white privilege, when people say whiteness, and they haven't thought out what that does to this human being, you tell this human being that, something wrong with you. Majorityism is a thing. White privilege is not. Majority privilege is the thing. White privilege is not. There's no such thing as white privilege and whiteness, because across the lands, throughout all history, majorityism has produced similar, if not worse, results than what has happened in the United States of America. And remember, the United States of America is also built around the Bill of Rights, which undermines this natural tendency, this natural ungodly tendency, I might add, for human beings to gather around the majorityisms, the orthodoxies, whatever they might be, whether they're physical, sexual, or otherwise, and to use that majorityism as a weapon of war against others. It's anti-competitionalism. You just don't want the competition. That's all that's going on here, nothing more. And to pin that on this child, because that's what you do, to pin that on all these children, that's what you do. You pin this horrible, horrible, just demeaning, subhumanizing terminology. You're putting it right on these children's faces. Remember that the next time. If you're watching this and you're one of these people that thinks whiteness and white privilege are appropriate terms to use in the general public, this is who you're killing. This is who you're murdering. This is who you're raping. This is what you're doing. Very ungodly. Very upside down Christ of you. Biden says it wasn't a hard... Well, we already did that. Where is the story at? And then I think we'll leave it at that. I could say so much more. And there you go. That's the end of our our report here. And I want to make sure that you go to freedomist.com/NW, and you can get links to all of these stories, which you can see right here at freedomist.com/NW. And we give you a variety of links. And I want to make sure that you all know that, as I say up here, shared links are not endorsements. So just because we're sharing the links on this page, obviously doesn't mean we're endorsing what these people say. Whether it's the left, the right, or otherwise, there's not many people that have much to say that I would fully endorse on this page. But it's important, if you want to know what's really going on, go to freedomist.com/NW and look at all of these links. What we do is we cover 6 stories a day, and then we have our top story report, our freedom report, our Christian headlines report, our editorial report, and we cover multiple links for our topics. We cover multiple links of the same topic, so you get a sense of what's going on across the spheres, because there's no news source that you can trust. What you have to do is you have to look at multiple news sources, and I go through 1,000+ links a day to collate this down to what I believe is the most useful news for freedomists to take a peek at, to get a sense of what's going on in the world. And with that, I'll say thank you very much for joining the show. I want to say also that I have possibly a cold. I think it's a cold. And I feel like I'm getting worse. So there is a possibility that there won't be a show tomorrow if it goes in the direction that I feel it might be. But I'm taking everything I can to try to head it off at the pass. And if not, I'll still do the news stories together. You'll still get the news links, but you might not get the show tomorrow. And at any rate, this has been Paul Gordon of thefreedomist.com. This has been the Daily Freedomist Show. One more thing. Next Thursday, we hope, maybe at 2 o'clock, I think that's what we're targeting, to do our first ever Big Freedomist Show, and that's where we'll have the Big Freedomist on, and that's my identical twin, Bill Collier. He's the editor of The Freedomist, and he will come on, and what we will do on that show is we'll go into a lot more detail with the stories that he chooses amongst the stories that I cover in the Daily Freedomist, and we'll go a lot more intel, sit-rep type reporting for you there.